The knife slipped against weathered wood as Delilah Foster carved another word into the saloon table, her fingers trembling not from cold but from the weight of what she was writing. Blood stained the edge of her cotton dress where her father had struck her hours before, and she knew tonight would be her last in Fort Worth, Texas, if she wanted to survive to see her 20th birthday. The Silver Star Saloon sat empty in the late afternoon of August 1882, that strange quiet hour between the lunch crowd and evening gamblers. Delilah had slipped in through the back door, knowing old Samuel kept it unlocked for deliveries. Her belongings fit into a single canvas bag hidden behind the bar, everything she owned in this world reduced to 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, and $14 she had been saving for 3 years. She pressed the knife deeper, finishing the final letters. The words sprawled across the scarred table surface in uneven script. I promise to never let fear decide my future. I promise to be brave even when bravery feels impossible. I promise to live free or die trying. That is quite a promise. Delilah's head snapped up, the knife clattering to the floor. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the Texas sun streaming through the saloon's front windows. He moved into the dim interior, and she could see him clearly now. Tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of strong coffee. Dust covered his boots and the lower half of his denim pants. A gun belt sat low on his hips, the leather worn smooth from use. "I did not mean to startle you," he said, raising both hands slightly. The door was open. "The saloon does not serve until 5, Delilah managed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I am not looking for whiskey." He stepped closer, his gaze moving to the table. "I am looking for work, and I saw you through the window." His eyes found the words carved into the wood, and he read them slowly, his lips moving slightly. When he looked back at her, something had shifted in his expression. "I will remember that promise. It is not for you to remember. It is mine. James Kincaid," he said, extending his hand. "And any woman brave enough to carve those words into a table deserves to have someone remember them in case she forgets." Delilah stared at his outstretched hand. She had been taught never to touch a strange man, never to speak to cowboys who drifted through town, never to do much of anything beyond cooking and cleaning and keeping her mouth shut. Her cheek still throbbed where her father's hand had connected, and her ribs ached from being shoved against the kitchen counter that morning. She took his hand. Delilah Foster. His grip was warm and calloused, the handshake brief but firm. "You are bleeding, Miss Foster. It is nothing." "It is not nothing." James pulled out a chair and gestured for her to sit. "May I?" Delilah found herself sinking into the chair, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. James knelt beside her, his movements careful and deliberate. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, clean despite the road dust on his clothes. "Your dress is torn here," he said quietly, indicating the spot near her hip where the fabric had ripped. "The bleeding is not bad, but it should be cleaned. How do you know about tending wounds?" "I rode with a cattle drive for 3 years. You learn to patch up men and animals both." He dabbed gently at the cut, his touch surprisingly gentle for someone with such rough hands. This was not an accident. It was not a question, but Delilah answered anyway. "My father has strong opinions about daughters who want to leave home. And you want to leave home. I have to leave home." The words came out fiercer than she intended. "Tonight, before he comes looking for me." James sat back on his heels, studying her face. "Where will you go?" "I have an aunt in San Antonio. I have never met her, but my mother used to write to her before she died. I found the letters in a trunk. The aunt wrote back saying I would always have a place with her if I needed it. San Antonio is 250 miles south. I know how far it is." Delilah stood, the sudden movement making her head spin. She gripped the table edge. "I can ride. I have money for a horse." $14 will not buy you much of a horse. You were listening to my thoughts. You said it out loud while you were carving. I think you did not realize. James stood as well, his height making her feel small, though she stood 5 feet and 6 inches herself. "Miss Foster, I do not mean to presume, but riding alone to San Antonio would be dangerous for anyone. For a woman alone, it would be near suicide. There are outlaws on those roads. Men who would not think twice about robbery or worse. Then what do you suggest I do? Stay here and let my father beat me until I am too broken to leave?" The words hung in the air between them. Through the saloon windows, Delilah could see Fort Worth going about its business. Wagons rolled past. A woman in a green dress crossed the street, parasol shading her face. Normal life, the kind Delilah had never quite been allowed to have. "I suggest you let me take you to San Antonio," James said. "You do not even know me. I know you are brave enough to carve promises into tables. I know you are running from a man who hurts you. I know you want to live free." He paused. "I also know I have been riding alone for 3 months looking for work, and I could use a reason to head south again. A friend from the cattle drive started a ranch outside San Antonio. He said he would always have work for me if I wanted it. I have been putting off going because the road alone gets lonely, and I am in no rush to arrive anywhere particular." "Why would you help me?" James looked at the carved words again. "My mother left my father when I was 12 years old." He drank and used his fists when the whiskey ran through him. "She took me and my sister and we ran in the night, just like you are planning to do. A stranger helped us then, a shopkeeper who let us hide in his store until the morning coach came. He did not have to help, but he did." He met her eyes. "I figure I owe the world a similar kindness." Delilah wanted to say no. Every instinct her father had beaten into her said to refuse, to not trust, to handle everything alone, because depending on others only led to disappointment and pain. But those instincts had kept her trapped for 20 years, had kept her silent and small and scared. "When would we leave?" she asked. "Tonight, if you are ready, or tomorrow morning early before the town wakes up." "Tonight," Delilah said firmly. "My father will come looking for me after dark. He always drinks at the tavern until 8, then comes home expecting dinner. When he finds me gone, he will tear the town apart. Then we leave at sunset. I have a horse stabled at Miller's. We can buy a second horse with your money and some of mine. It will not be fancy, but it will get you to San Antonio. I cannot let you pay for my escape. Consider it an investment in good company on a long road." James smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something warmer. "Besides, you can repay me by telling me the story of how you learned to carve like that. Those are clean letters for someone working with a kitchen knife. My mother taught me woodworking before she died. My father thought it was unladylike, but she insisted some skills were worth having regardless of gender. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was the best person I have ever known." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them away. "I am going to visit her grave before we leave. She is buried at the church cemetery on the edge of town." "We can do that," James agreed. "I will meet you there at sunset. Bring only what you can carry easily. We need to move fast once we start." Delilah retrieved her canvas bag from behind the bar. She looked around the Silver Star Saloon one last time, at the table with her carved promise, at the bar where she had stolen these few moments of rebellion. Then she followed James out into the bright Texas afternoon. The streets of Fort Worth bustled with activity. Cowboys drove cattle through the main thoroughfare, heading toward the stockyards. Women in long skirts and bonnets carried baskets of goods from the general store. Children chased each other between buildings, their laughter rising above the general din. Fort Worth had grown rapidly in recent years, the railroad bringing prosperity and people. Her father had moved them here 5 years ago, chasing opportunities in the cattle trade. Those opportunities had never materialized, and his failures had made his fists quicker. "I should not be seen with you," Delilah said as they walked. "If anyone tells my father I was with a stranger, he will come after us twice as hard. Then I will walk ahead, follow at a distance. I will meet you at the cemetery at sunset." James tipped his hat to her and strode away, his long legs covering ground quickly. Delilah waited a moment, then headed in a different direction, taking the back streets toward the small room she shared with her father in a boarding house near the stockyards. Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house owner, sat on the porch shelling peas when Delilah approached. "Your father is looking for you," she called out. "He came by an hour ago, mean as a snake, said you had better be home before supper." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson." Delilah kept her voice steady. "I will be certain to have his meal ready." Inside the small room, she moved quickly. She added her other dress to the canvas bag, along with a comb, some soap, and the miniature portrait of her mother she kept hidden beneath her mattress. The $14 she had saved went into a small cloth purse she could tie to her waist beneath her dress. She looked around the sparse room, at the narrow bed, and the single chair and the window that looked out onto an alley. She had lived here for 5 years and felt nothing at leaving it behind. She changed into her better dress, a dark blue cotton that her mother had made before she died. The fabric was worn but sturdy, good for travel. She braided her honey-colored hair and pinned it up, tucking it under a plain bonnet. Then she sat on the bed and waited, watching the sun move across the floor as afternoon shifted toward evening. At 6 o'clock, she heard heavy boots on the stairs. Her father's voice boomed through the thin walls as he shouted at another boarder about something trivial. Delilah's hands clenched in her lap. She could leave now, slip out while he was distracted, but she had told James sunset at the cemetery. She had to trust that timing, had to trust this stranger who had read her carved promise and offered help. The boots moved past her door. Her father was heading to his own room 2 doors down. She heard his door slam, heard him moving around. Any moment he would remember he was hungry, would come pounding on her door demanding food. Delilah stood, picked up her canvas bag and walked out of the room. She did not close the door behind her. She simply walked away, down the stairs, past Mrs. Henderson still shelling peas on the porch and into the street. "Delilah," Mrs. Henderson called after her. "Where are you going with that bag?" "Just to visit my mother's grave," Delilah called back. "I will be home soon." She would not be home soon. She would never be home again. Not to that room, not to that man who called himself her father but had forgotten what fatherhood meant. The cemetery sat on a low hill at the edge of Fort Worth, surrounded by an iron fence that had rusted in places. Wildflowers grew between the graves, purple and yellow blooms that her mother would have loved. Delilah found her mother's headstone easily. She had visited it every week for the past 6 years, since consumption had stolen her mother away. "I am leaving, Mama," she whispered, kneeling beside the grave. "I am finally doing what you always told me to do. I am choosing myself. I am choosing freedom." She traced her fingers over the carved name, Sarah Foster, beloved wife and mother. "I wish you could meet him. The cowboy who is helping me. His name is James and he has kind eyes. He reminds me of how you used to describe grandfather before he died, steady and sure. I hope I live up to that description." Delilah turned. James stood a few feet away, holding the reins of 2 horses. Both were brown mares, sturdy-looking animals with gentle eyes. He had changed his shirt and strapped a bedroll to each saddle. You move quietly for a big man, Delilah said, standing and brushing dirt from her dress. A skill learned from trying not to wake a camp full of sleeping cowboys. He brought the horses forward. This is Rosie, he said, indicating the smaller of the two mares. She is gentle and does not spook easy. The stable master said she is good for long rides. And the other, that is Pepper. She is mine, has been for 2 years now. Saved her from a man who was beating her because she went lame. Turned out she just had a stone in her shoe. Some men do not have the patience to check before they use their fists. Delilah thought of her father and nodded. Thank you for this, for helping me. I will pay you back every cent once I find work in San Antonio. We can discuss terms on the road. Right now, we need to ride. The sun is setting, and I would rather have the cover of dusk for leaving town. Delilah mounted Rosie with practiced ease. Her mother had taught her to ride as a girl before they moved to Fort Worth, back when they lived on a small farm and life had been simpler. The mare shifted beneath her, testing her weight, then settled. James swung up onto Pepper with fluid grace. We will head south out of town, following the main road for a few miles until we are clear of Fort Worth. Then we will cut west and pick up the San Antonio road. If anyone asks, we are brother and sister heading to visit family. Do I look like your sister? James grinned. No, but most people do not look too close. Just keep your head down and follow my lead if anyone stops us. They rode out of the cemetery as the sun painted the sky orange and red. Fort Worth spread below them, lamplight beginning to glow in windows as families settled in for the evening. Somewhere in that town, her father was probably just now realizing she was gone. Somewhere down there, her carved promise remained in that saloon table, words made permanent in wood. The road south was well-traveled, wide enough for wagons and marked with signs pointing toward smaller towns and ranches. They rode in silence for the first hour, both alert for any signs of pursuit. But the road remained quiet except for the sound of hooves and the evening birds calling to each other. When full darkness fell, James slowed his pace. We will ride for another 2 hours, then make camp. I want to put good distance between us and town tonight. Tomorrow we can set a more reasonable pace. How long will the journey take? If we push 5 days. If we take it easier on the horses, a week. I suggest the week. Better to arrive safely than quickly. A week alone with a stranger. A week of trusting someone she had met only hours ago. But as Delilah looked at James's profile in the moonlight, at the easy way he sat his horse and the careful attention he paid to their surroundings, she felt an unfamiliar sensation. Safety. For the first time in years, she felt safe. They made camp that night near a creek, the sound of running water masking the small sounds they made preparing their bedrolls. James built a tiny fire, just enough to warm some beans and coffee, then smothered it to avoid drawing attention. You should sleep, he said, settling against a tree. I will keep watch for a few hours, then wake you to take a turn. You trust me to keep watch. You came this far, did you not? You are braver than half the men I rode with on cattle drives. I figure I can trust you to stay awake and alert for a few hours. Delilah lay down on her bedroll, the ground hard beneath her back. Above, stars scattered across the sky in thick clusters, so many more visible out here than in town. She listened to the creek and the night insects and James's steady breathing. James, she said quietly. Yes. Why did you really help me? You said you owed the world a kindness, but there is more to it than that. I can tell. A long pause. Then James said, my sister. The one I told you about, who my mother and I ran away with. She did not make it to adulthood. My father found us 2 years after we left. Tracked us down in Kansas. My mother and I got away, but Clara was older, almost 18. She thought she could talk to him, reason with him. She was always the gentle one, the one who saw the best in people. What happened? He killed her. Beat her to death in a rage, then hanged himself in the jail cell that same night. James's voice was flat, emotionless, the way people sound when they have told a story too many times. I was 14. I swore that day I would never let another woman face that kind of violence alone if I could help it. So when I saw you in that saloon, carving your promise, I knew I could not walk away. I am so sorry. It was 12 years ago. The pain dulls, but it never quite leaves. He shifted against the tree. Sleep now. Tomorrow is a long day. Delilah closed her eyes, but sleep came slowly. She thought about Clara, about her own mother, about all the women who had suffered at the hands of men who were supposed to protect them. She thought about the promise she had carved, about being brave enough to choose freedom. When she finally slept, she dreamed of open roads and endless sky. The next morning dawned clear and hot. They rode through landscape that gradually shifted from the greener plains around Fort Worth to drier, more rugged terrain. Mesquite trees dotted the hills, and wildflowers bloomed in unexpected places, splashes of color against the brown earth. James proved to be good company. He told stories about his time on cattle drives, about ornery bulls and midnight stampedes, and the time a cowboy named Dutch tried to cook beans with gunpowder thinking it would make them cook faster. He asked about her life too, gentle questions that let her share as much or as little as she wanted. My mother was a schoolteacher before she married, Delilah told him as they let the horses drink from a stream. She loved books and learning. She taught me to read when I was 4, writing lessons in the dirt outside our house. My father hated it. He said women with too much learning got ideas above their station. Your mother sounds like she had all the right ideas. She died believing I would find a way out. The last thing she said to me was, "Be braver than I was." I did not understand what she meant then. I thought she was the bravest person in the world for enduring my father. But now I think she meant she wished she had left, wished she had been brave enough to take me and go. Bravery is not always about leaving, James said. Sometimes it is about surviving. Your mother kept you alive and taught you to read and ride and think for yourself. That is its own kind of courage. They made good progress that second day, covering nearly 40 miles. That night, they camped under a massive oak tree, and James showed Delilah how to properly clean and care for a saddle. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, and she found herself watching the way his fingers worked the leather, the quiet competence in every movement. "You are a good teacher," she said. "I had good teachers myself. A man named Robert taught me most of what I know about horses and leather work. He was the trail boss on my first drive, patience of a saint and a good heart. Where is he now? He died 3 years back. Heart gave out on him. He was 62, had been riding cattle since he was a boy." James looked up at the stars. He always said he wanted to die in the saddle, and he got his wish. Dropped dead leading a herd across the Colorado River. The men said he had a smile on his face. That is a good way to go, doing what you love. I think so too. The third day brought heat so intense it shimmered off the road in waves. They rode mostly in silence, conserving energy, stopping frequently to water the horses and themselves. Delilah's skin burned despite her bonnet, and her lips cracked despite frequent sips from the canteen. "There is a town about 10 miles ahead," James said as afternoon waned. "Small place called Cedar Springs. We can get a room for the night, have a real meal and a bath, rest the horses properly." "Is that safe? What if someone recognizes me? We are over 100 miles from Fort Worth now. Nobody here will know you," he smiled. "Besides, I think we could both use a night on something softer than dirt." Cedar Springs was indeed small, barely a dozen buildings clustered around a crossroads. But it had a general store, a saloon, and a boarding house run by a plump woman named Mrs. Garcia, who spoke with a thick accent and smiled warmly at them. "We have 2 rooms available," she said, showing them upstairs. "Small but clean. Supper is at 6 if you want to join us." Delilah's room was tiny, barely large enough for the narrow bed and washstand, but it had real walls and a door that locked. She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed the dust from her face and arms, watching brown water pool in the bowl. Her reflection in the small mirror showed someone she barely recognized. Sun-browned skin, chapped lips, and eyes that looked older somehow. But also something else. A light that had not been there before. A spark of something that might have been hope. Supper was served family-style in Mrs. Garcia's dining room. Besides Delilah and James, there were 3 other guests: a traveling salesman, an older couple heading to San Antonio to see their daughter, and a young woman about Delilah's age traveling with her brother. "You are newlyweds?" Mrs. Garcia asked, smiling at Delilah and James. Before Delilah could correct her, James said smoothly, "Just married last week, heading to San Antonio to start our new life." The older woman clasped her hands together. "How wonderful! You must be so excited." "Very excited," Delilah managed, feeling heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the warm room. After supper, James caught her arm gently. "Sorry about that. It seemed easier than explaining the truth, and married couples draw less suspicion than a man and woman traveling alone." "It is fine." It was smart thinking. They stood in the hallway outside their rooms. Lamplight cast shadows on the walls, and from downstairs came the sound of Mrs. Garcia humming as she cleaned up from supper. "Delilah," James said quietly, "I want you to know I would never presume anything. You are safe with me. When we get to San Antonio and you find your aunt, I will go my own way. I am helping you because it is the right thing to do, not because I expect anything in return." "I know," Delilah said, and she realized she did know. She trusted this man, this stranger who had read her carved promise and offered help without hesitation. "But James, what if my aunt does not want me? What if the letter was just politeness and she has no room for a niece she has never met? Then we will figure something else out. San Antonio is a big city. There are jobs for women, respectable work. I know some people there. We will find you a situation." "You keep saying we." James met her eyes. "I am not going to abandon you in a strange city with no support. Whatever happens, I will make sure you are settled and safe before I leave." Something in Delilah's chest tightened. She had spent so long believing she had to handle everything alone that depending on anyone was weakness. But maybe that was not true. Maybe accepting help, accepting kindness, was its own form of strength. "Thank you," she whispered. James smiled. "Get some sleep. We have a long ride tomorrow." Delilah lay in her narrow bed that night, listening to the sounds of the boarding house settling. Through the thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Garcia moving about downstairs, could hear the salesman snoring in the next room. And beyond that, the vast silence of the Texas night. She thought about James in the next room, about the way he looked at her like she was someone worth protecting, about the careful respect in his every word and action. She thought about her carved promise, about bravery and freedom and choosing her own future. And she thought, maybe for the first time, that future might include things she had never let herself imagine. Things like trust and partnership, and the slow building of something real with another person. The 4th day took them through rougher country. The road narrowed to a trail in places, winding through rocky hills covered in scrub brush. They saw fewer travelers, just the occasional rider or small wagon train. Around midday, they crested a hill and James pulled up short. Ahead, 3 men on horseback blocked the trail. Even from a distance, Delilah could see the guns on their hips, the way they sat their horses with the easy confidence of men used to intimidating others. "Stay behind me," James said quietly. "Let me do the talking." As they approached, one of the men rode forward. He was older, maybe 40, with a scar running down his left cheek and eyes as cold as January ice. "This is a toll road," the man said. "Costs $10 per person to pass." "This is not a toll road," James replied calmly. "This is public land and we have every right to travel it." "That is where you are wrong, friend. Everything changed when we decided to collect tolls. Now you can pay up, or you can turn around and find another way through." Delilah's hand moved to the small knife she kept in her boot, the same knife she had used to carve her promise. Her heart hammered, but she kept her breathing steady. "We are not looking for trouble," James said. "We are just passing through on our way to San Antonio." "Then it should be no trouble to pay the toll." I said no. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. The scarred man's hand moved toward his gun. But before he could draw, James pulled his own pistol with a speed that made Delilah gasp. He did not point it at anyone, just held it casually, but the message was clear. "I rode 3 years protecting cattle from rustlers and bandits," James said, his voice still calm. "I have faced down wolves and outlaws and a stampede that killed 2 men. I am not going to be intimidated by 3 men playing at being highwaymen on a public trail. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to move aside and let us pass, and we are all going to forget this conversation happened." The scarred man studied James for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. "You have spine, I will give you that. And I am not interested in dying over $10. He gestured to his companions and they moved their horses aside. "Ride on, then. But watch yourselves. There are meaner men than us on this road." James holstered his gun and urged Pepper forward. Delilah followed, her body rigid with tension until they were well past the 3 men. "Are you all right?" James asked once they were out of earshot. "That was terrifying." "I know, but they were bluffing. Real bandits would have drawn first and talked later. Those men were just trying to scare travelers into handing over money." "How did you know they were bluffing?" "Their horses were too well fed. Real outlaws on the run do not have time to properly care for their animals. Those men have homes to go back to. They are just trying to make some extra money through intimidation." Delilah let out a shaky breath. "I am glad you knew that. I was certain we were about to be robbed or killed. I would not have let that happen." James glanced back at her. "You did well back there. Stayed calm, stayed quiet. Some people panic in situations like that, and panic gets people killed. I was terrified. Being brave does not mean not being afraid. It means doing what needs to be done despite the fear." He smiled. "Sound familiar?" Delilah thought of her carved promise. "Live free or die trying." "Exactly." They rode hard after that, putting distance between themselves and the would-be bandits. By evening, they had covered another 30 miles, bringing them to a small creek where they made camp beneath a cluster of cottonwood trees. James built a fire and made a simple stew from dried beef and beans. They ate in companionable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Can I ask you something?" Delilah said after they had finished eating. "Of course. Why are you not married?" "You are what, 26, 27? Most men your age have wives and children." 27, James confirmed. "And I suppose I never found the right woman. The cattle drives kept me moving, never settling anywhere long enough to court someone properly. And I have seen enough bad marriages to know I do not want to rush into something just for the sake of being married." "What would the right woman be like?" James poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night. Someone brave. Someone who knows her own mind and is not afraid to speak it. Someone who can handle the hard parts of life without losing herself. He looked up, meeting her eyes across the fire. Someone like you. The words hung in the air between them. Delilah's breath caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to respond but could not find words. "I am sorry," James said quickly. "That was inappropriate. You are under my protection, and I should not have said anything that might make you uncomfortable." "It does not make me uncomfortable," Delilah said slowly. "It makes me wonder." "Wonder what?" "If I am brave enough to want something for myself. Not just freedom from my father, but something more. Something I never let myself imagine before." James set down his stick. "What do you want, Delilah?" It was the first time he had used her given name without the miss in front of it. The intimacy of it sent a shiver through her despite the warm night. "I want what my mother never had. A choice. A partner, not a master. Someone who sees me as an equal, not as property to be managed." She paused. "I want to know if such a thing is even possible." "It is possible. My mother found it after my father. She married again when I was 16, a shopkeeper named William. He was gentle and kind and treated her like the queen of his small kingdom. They had 10 good years together before the influenza took her. That must have been hard, losing her after everything you had been through together." "It was, but I was glad she got those years of happiness. She deserved them." Delilah stood and walked around the fire to where James sat. She settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I think you deserve happiness too. I think we both do." They sat in silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. The night sounds surrounded them, crickets and frogs and the wind moving through the cottonwood leaves. And somewhere in that peaceful moment, something shifted between them. The careful distance they had maintained for 4 days dissolved, replaced by an awareness of each other that went beyond mere traveling companions. "Tell me about your aunt," James said eventually. "What do you know about her?" "Not much. Her name is Dorothy Fairweather. She is my mother's younger sister, never married, runs a boarding house in San Antonio. From the letters, she sounds independent and strong-minded. My father hated her, which I take as a good sign." James laughed. "That does seem like a good sign." "What about your friend in San Antonio? The one with the ranch, Nathaniel Bridger. We rode together for 2 years on cattle drives. He saved up his pay and bought land south of the city, started raising horses. He has been trying to convince me to partner with him for a year now. He says there is good money in horses, especially with the army buying." "Why have you not taken him up on it?" James was quiet for a moment. "I suppose I was waiting for a reason to settle down, waiting for something to feel right. And now—" He turned his head, his face close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Now I think I might have found that reason." Delilah's heart hammered against her ribs. She had known men who were charming, men who said pretty words, but James was different. Every word he spoke carried weight, carried truth. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she had never experienced before. "We have known each other 4 days," she whispered. "I know. That is not long enough to make decisions. I know that too. But I feel like I have known you longer. Like somehow you understand parts of me I have never shown anyone." James reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were gentle, his touch reverent. "I feel the same way. Like I was waiting for you without knowing I was waiting. That is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. I can do better." He smiled. "You are beautiful in firelight and moonlight and sunlight. You are the bravest person I have met. You make me want to be better, do better. You make me think about futures I never let myself imagine before." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. I am terrified. Of what? Of wanting this. Of wanting you. What if my aunt does not want me? What if I end up alone in San Antonio with nowhere to go and no one to turn to? What if I have run from one bad situation into another? Then we will figure it out together. James took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I meant what I said, Delilah. I am not going to abandon you. Whatever happens when we reach San Antonio, we face it together. Unless you tell me otherwise, unless you want me to leave. I do not want you to leave. Then I will not. They sat holding hands until the fire died completely and the night grew cold. Then James spread his bedroll and Delilah spread hers, close enough that they could reach out and touch if they wanted to. And though they did not speak again that night, Delilah felt a peace she had never known before settling over her like a blanket. The fifth day dawned with clouds covering the sun. By mid-morning, rain began to fall, a steady drizzle that turned the trail to mud and made travel miserable. They rode with their heads down, water dripping from their hat brims, the horses plodding steadily through the muck. They reached a small town called Lockhart as afternoon turned to evening. The rain had become a downpour, thunder rolling across the sky, lightning illuminating the landscape in brief, brilliant flashes. "We need shelter," James shouted over the sound of the storm. "There, the church." He pointed to a white building with a tall steeple, and they rode toward it quickly. The church doors were unlocked, and they stumbled inside, dripping and shivering. The interior was simple, wooden pews facing a small altar, windows showing the storm raging outside. "We cannot stay here," Delilah said. "This is a church. It would not be proper for us to spend the night together in a church. It is just shelter from a storm. God would not want us to drown or catch our death from cold just to maintain propriety." James was already pulling off his soaked coat. "Besides, there is no one here to see us. Someone will come eventually, the reverend or someone from town. Then we will explain we needed shelter from the storm. It is the truth." Delilah wrung water from her skirt, forming a puddle on the floor. Her teeth chattered despite the relatively warm air. James found some old blankets in a storage room and brought them out, draping one around her shoulders. "We should get out of these wet clothes," he said. "I will turn my back while you change into your dry dress. Then you can do the same for me." It made sense, but Delilah's face burned at the thought. Still, she was soaked to the skin and shivering violently. Pneumonia was a real threat, had killed more than one person she knew. "All right, turn around." James faced the wall while Delilah quickly stripped off her wet dress and undergarments, wrapping herself in a blanket while she rummaged through her canvas bag for dry clothes. Her hands shook so badly she could barely work the buttons on her spare dress. "Are you all right?" James asked, his back still turned. "I am fine. Just cold. Sit down when you are dressed. I will see if I can find something to make a fire in. Even a small one would help." Once Delilah was clothed again, James changed his own wet shirt and pants for a spare shirt from his saddlebag. He gave Delilah a pile of wet clothes. "Can you hang these up to dry while I look for firewood?" The church had a small fireplace near the back, probably used to heat the building during winter services. James found wood stacked outside under a tarp and brought in enough for a small fire. Soon flames crackled cheerfully, and the chill began to leave Delilah's bones. They sat close to the fire, sharing the blankets, their wet clothes draped over pews to dry. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the church felt like a sanctuary in more ways than one. "I used to come to church every Sunday with my mother," Delilah said quietly. "After she died, my father stopped going. He said God had abandoned him, so he was abandoning God. What do you believe?" "I believe my mother is somewhere better than she was here. I believe there is more to this world than what we can see and touch." Beyond that, I do not know. What about you? James stared into the fire. I believe there is something bigger than us, some force that moves through the world, bringing people together when they need each other most. Call it God or fate or luck, I do not care about the name. But I know something brought me to that saloon at the exact moment you were carving your promise. That was not random chance. You think we were meant to meet. I think some things are meant to be. The firelight played across his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. Delilah realized she was staring and looked away, heat rising to her cheeks. You can look at me, James said softly. I do not mind, it feels forward. We are sitting in a church in the middle of a storm, wearing blankets while our clothes dry. I think we are past worrying about being forward. Delilah laughed, and the sound echoed through the empty church. I suppose you are right. Can I tell you something? James shifted closer. I have been trying to be respectful, trying not to push too fast or presume too much. But the truth is, every day we travel together, I find myself more drawn to you, more convinced that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. James, let me finish. I know we have only known each other 5 days. I know you are running from a bad situation and probably not thinking clearly about the future. I know I should wait, should give you time to settle in San Antonio and figure out your life. But I also know life is short and uncertain. My sister taught me that. Sometimes you have to speak your truth when you have the chance, because tomorrow is not promised. Delilah's breath caught. What is your truth? That I am falling in love with you, that I want to stand beside you wherever you go. That if your aunt does not want you, then you can come with me to Nathaniel's ranch. That I want to build a life with you if you will have me. The words hung in the air between them, as real and solid as the wooden pews, as warm as the fire crackling in the hearth. Delilah felt tears spill down her cheeks. I am falling in love with you too, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Why? Because I swore I would never depend on a man again. I swore I would be free, make my own way, answer to no one. Love is not dependence, Delilah. Love is partnership. Two people choosing to walk the same path because it is better together than alone. You do not give up your freedom by loving someone. You just share it with another person. How do you know that? How can you be so sure? Because I saw it with my mother and William. They were partners in every sense of the word. He never tried to control her or diminish her. He celebrated her strength, encouraged her dreams. That is the kind of love I want. That is the kind of love I would offer you. Delilah reached out and touched his face, feeling the rasp of stubble under her palm, the warmth of his skin. I want that too. I want to believe it is possible. Then believe it. Take a leap of faith. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and kissed him. His lips were warm and gentle, the kiss sweet and unhurried. His hand came up to cup the back of her head, fingers threading through her hair. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I have never done that before, Delilah admitted. Kissed someone of my own free will. Did you like it? Very much. James smiled, and it lit up his whole face. Good, because I plan to spend a lot of time kissing you if you will let me. I will let you. They kissed again, longer this time, deeper. Delilah felt something unfurl in her chest, something that had been locked away for so long she had forgotten it existed. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. When the storm finally passed near midnight, they lay wrapped in blankets near the dying fire, Delilah's head pillowed on James's chest, his arms around her. They did not do anything inappropriate, just held each other and talked in whispers about the future. When we get to San Antonio, James said, we will find your aunt first, see if she can take you in. If she can, then I will court you properly. Come calling at respectable hours, bring flowers, ask permission to take you to church socials and town events. And if she cannot take me in, Then you come with me to Nathaniel's ranch. But we do it right. You get your own room in the bunkhouse or in town. I court you properly there too. I want your reputation protected, Delilah. I want everyone to know you are a respectable woman, not some girl I picked up on the road. You did pick me up on the road. You know what I mean. Delilah smiled against his chest. I do, and I appreciate it. My reputation is all I have in this world. You have more than that. You have courage and intelligence and a good heart, but I understand what you mean. They dozed fitfully through the night, waking when the fire died, dozing again as dawn began to lighten the windows. When full morning came, they dressed in their still damp clothes and left coins on the altar as thanks for the shelter. Then they mounted their horses and continued south toward San Antonio. The 6th day passed in a blur of riding and conversation. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories, their likes and dislikes, their dreams for the future. Delilah told James about her mother's woodworking, about the hours spent watching her carve intricate designs into furniture and picture frames. James told Delilah about the cattle drives, about seeing the country from Texas to Kansas, about sleeping under so many stars he stopped being able to count them. I want to raise horses, he said as they rode. Not cattle. Horses are smarter, more loyal, and the work is more sustainable. You build a reputation for quality animals and buyers come to you. No more months on the trail, sleeping in dirt, eating beans every meal. It sounds like a good life. It would be better with you in it. That night they camped beside a river, the water running clear and cold from some distant source. While James tended the horses, Delilah waded into the shallows, washing the dust and sweat from her face and arms. The water felt glorious against her sun-burned skin. You should come in, she called to James. The water is wonderful. He walked down to the river's edge, rolling up his pants legs and wading in. The current tugged at them, strong but not dangerous. They splashed each other like children, laughing and forgetting for a moment all the hardship and fear of the past week. When they emerged from the river, both were soaked but grinning. James pulled Delilah close and kissed her, droplets of water clinging to their skin, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I love you, he said against her lips. I love you too. The words felt new and strange and absolutely right. The 7th day brought them within sight of San Antonio. The city sprawled across the landscape, bigger than Fort Worth, busier, full of life and noise and possibility. Delilah's stomach clenched with nerves as they rode down the main street. Her boarding house is supposed to be near the Alamo, Delilah said, checking the address she had copied from her mother's letters. On Commerce Street. They found it easily enough, a 2-story building with a sign reading Fairweather House hanging above the door. The building was well maintained, with flower boxes in the windows and fresh paint on the trim. Delilah dismounted, her legs shaky after a week of hard riding. James came to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. You want me to come with you? He asked. Please. They tied the horses and walked up the steps together. Delilah knocked on the door, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. A woman opened the door. She was in her early 40s, with graying blonde hair and blue eyes that were startlingly familiar. She looked at Delilah and her hand flew to her mouth. Sarah, she whispered. No, madam, I am Delilah, Sarah's daughter. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Of course you are. You look just like her. I am Dorothy, your aunt. She pulled Delilah into a fierce hug. Come in, come in. Both of you. The interior of the boarding house was warm and welcoming, with comfortable furniture and walls covered in paintings and photographs. Dorothy ushered them into a sitting room and demanded to know everything. Delilah told her about her mother's death, about her father's violence, about the escape and the week-long journey to San Antonio. James sat quietly beside her, his hand occasionally finding hers for reassurance. When the story was finished, Dorothy was crying openly. "I begged your mother to leave him," she said. "I wrote her every year, told her she could come here, that I would help her, but she always said she could not leave. She had nowhere to go with a child, no way to support herself." "She stayed for me," Delilah said quietly. "She endured it all to keep me safe. And now you have done what she never could. You left. You chose freedom." Dorothy squeezed Delilah's hand. "I am so proud of you, and your mother would be too. Does that mean I can stay here with you?" "Of course you can stay. You are family. This is your home now for as long as you want it." Relief flooded through Delilah so intensely she felt lightheaded. She had a home. She had family. She was safe. Dorothy turned to James. "And you, young man, thank you for bringing my niece to me safely. The world needs more good men like you." "It was my honor, madam." "Where will you go now?" James glanced at Delilah. "I have a friend with a ranch south of here. I will be working with him, raising horses. And courting my niece, I hope." Dorothy's eyes twinkled. "If you will allow it, madam, if Delilah will have me." "I think that decision is up to Delilah, not me. But for what it is worth, any man who would spend a week protecting a woman he barely knew, asking nothing in return, is a man worth knowing." "I would like him to court me," Delilah said. "Very much." Dorothy beamed. "Then it is settled. Now, you both look exhausted and half-starved. Let me feed you properly, and then, Delilah, I will show you to your room. James, you are welcome to stay here tonight as well. I have a spare room, and it would save you riding out to your friend's ranch in the dark." That night, after a meal of roasted chicken and fresh bread and vegetables that tasted like heaven after a week of trail food, Delilah lay in a real bed with clean sheets and a soft mattress. Her body ached from 7 days of riding, but her heart felt full in a way she had never experienced. She thought about her carved promise, about choosing bravery and freedom. She had done both, and in the process, she had found something she never expected to find. Love. Real, honest love with a man who saw her as an equal, who celebrated her strength instead of trying to break it. The next morning, James prepared to ride out to Nathaniel's ranch. Delilah walked him to his horse, Dorothy tactfully staying inside to give them privacy. "I will come calling on Sunday," James said. "We can attend church together if you would like. Start doing things properly." "I would like that very much." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "I meant everything I said, Delilah. I love you. I want to build a life with you. I know we need time to court properly, to let you settle and figure out who you are outside of running. But I want you to know my intentions are serious. I know they are, and I love you too." They kissed, slow and sweet, the morning sun warming their skin. When they pulled apart, James mounted Pepper and looked down at her. "I will remember that promise," he said, smiling. Delilah laughed. "You really did remember it. I will never forget it. You carved it into wood, but you carved it into my heart too. Your bravery inspired me from the first moment I saw you. Come back soon. As soon as I can." She watched him ride away, her hand raised in farewell until he disappeared around a corner. Then she turned and walked back into Fairweather House, into her new life, into the future she had been brave enough to choose. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. Delilah helped her aunt run the boarding house, learning the business and meeting the various lodgers who came and went. She discovered she enjoyed the work, enjoyed talking to travelers and making the house feel welcoming. Dorothy taught her bookkeeping and menu planning and how to manage difficult guests with grace. James came calling every Sunday, and they attended church together, then walked through the city streets. He told her about the ranch, about the work of building a horse breeding operation from the ground up. Nathaniel proved to be a good friend and a better business partner, and James's investment in the ranch had been welcomed enthusiastically. "We have 12 horses now," James told her one Sunday in October, 2 months after they had arrived in San Antonio. "Good stock, strong bloodlines. The Army has already put in an order for 6 horses to be delivered in spring. That is wonderful news." "It is. And it means we will have steady income." He took her hand as they walked. "Which brings me to something I want to ask you." Delilah's heart quickened. "What is it?" James led her to a bench overlooking the San Antonio River. They sat, and he turned to face her fully. "I know we have only been courting 2 months. I know by all the rules of propriety I should wait longer. But Delilah, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I want to marry you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple gold band with a single small diamond. "It is not fancy," he said, "but it is honest like us. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Delilah's face. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." James slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and Delilah felt like she was flying. They were married 2 months later in December 1882, in the same church where they had sheltered from the storm. Dorothy cried through the entire ceremony. Nathaniel stood as James's best man, and one of the boarding house lodgers, a kind woman named Margaret, stood as Delilah's attendant. Delilah wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in Dorothy's attic, altered to fit her smaller frame. As she walked down the aisle toward James, she thought about all the promises she had made that day in the saloon. She had been brave. She had chosen freedom. And in choosing freedom, she had chosen love. James looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. When they exchanged vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you. I promise to be your partner in all things. I promise to celebrate your strength and support your dreams. I promise to remember the words you carved in that table and to help you keep those promises every day of our lives." Delilah's voice shook as she made her own vows. "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you. I promise to be your partner in all things. I promise to build a life with you based on respect and trust. I promise to be brave, even when bravery is hard. And I promise to never forget that you saw me when I needed to be seen, and you chose to help when you did not have to." When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed her like he was sealing a promise, like he was claiming his future. And Delilah kissed him back with all the love in her heart, all the joy she had never known she could feel. The reception was small but joyful, held at Fairweather House with Dorothy's best cooking and a few close friends. They danced in the parlor, James twirling Delilah until she was dizzy and laughing. That night, they went to their own small house on Nathaniel's ranch property. James had spent 2 months building it with Nathaniel's help. A sturdy 2-room cabin with a fireplace and a porch that overlooked the hills. It was not fancy, but it was theirs. James carried her over the threshold, setting her down gently in the main room. A fire burned in the hearth and someone had left flowers on the table, probably Nathaniel's thoughtful gesture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kincaid," James said. "I love the sound of that. Mrs. Kincaid." They stood in the middle of their new home, holding each other, watching the fire cast dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the Texas night was vast and dark, full of possibilities. "Are you happy?" James asked. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." "Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making you even happier." He kissed her then, and the kiss deepened, became something more than the chaste kisses they had shared during courtship. His hands moved to her hair, pulling out the pins until it fell around her shoulders. Her fingers worked the buttons of his shirt, both of them clumsy with want and nerves. They made love for the first time in front of the fire, taking their time, learning each other's bodies with patience and care. James was gentle and attentive, making sure Delilah felt safe and cherished. And when it was over, they lay tangled together in blankets, hearts beating in sync. "I love you," Delilah whispered. "I love you too, always." The first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The ranch work was hard, long days of breaking horses and mending fences and dealing with the unpredictable Texas weather. But they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense. Delilah discovered she had a talent for training horses, a gentle patience that the animals responded to. Soon she was working alongside James and Nathaniel, earning respect from the ranch hands and neighboring ranchers who had initially scoffed at the idea of a woman horse trainer. "You are a natural," Nathaniel told her one afternoon, watching her work with a skittish mare. "That horse has been nothing but trouble, but she trusts you." "Animals can sense fear and anger," Delilah said. "They respond to calm confidence. It is not so different from people." By their first anniversary, the ranch was thriving. They had 20 horses, contracts with 3 different buyers, and a reputation for quality animals and fair dealing. James and Nathaniel were already planning expansions, talking about buying more land and increasing the herd. That winter, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She told James on Christmas morning, wrapping the news in a small box like a gift. He cried when he opened it and read the note inside. "We are going to have a baby." "A baby," he repeated, pulling her into his arms. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" "I am terrified and thrilled in equal measure. But yes, I am happy. So happy." Their son was born in August 1884, 2 years after they had met in that Fort Worth saloon. They named him Robert after the trail boss who had taught James so much. He had dark hair like his father and blue eyes like his mother. And from the moment he entered the world squalling and red-faced, both parents were completely in love. Delilah proved to be a natural mother, patient and nurturing but also insistent that her son grow up knowing women were just as capable as men. James supported this completely, often caring for Robert while Delilah worked with the horses, never once suggesting that childcare was solely her responsibility. "He should see us as equals," James said, bouncing Robert on his knee while Delilah went over the ranch books. "He should grow up knowing that marriage is partnership, that men and women both have strengths to contribute. You are a good father. I had a good example in William, and I had a terrible example in my own father. I know what kind of man I want to be." 2 years later, their daughter was born. They named her Sarah, after Delilah's mother, and she had her grandmother's gentle spirit and fierce determination. Dorothy cried when they told her the name, holding her great niece and telling her stories about the woman she was named for. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to grow. James and Nathaniel expanded their operation, hiring more hands and buying adjacent land. Delilah became known throughout the region as one of the finest horse trainers in Texas, her reputation bringing buyers from as far away as Louisiana and Arkansas. They added rooms to their cabin as the children grew, expanding it from 2 rooms to 5. The porch, where they had sat on their wedding night, became a gathering place for family dinners, for evenings watching the sunset, for telling stories and dreaming about the future. On their 10th wedding anniversary, James took Delilah back to Fort Worth. It was her first time returning since the night they had fled, and she was nervous about facing the past. But she wanted to visit her mother's grave, wanted to tell her mother in person about the life she had built. They stood together in the same cemetery where James had found her with the horses 10 years earlier. Delilah placed flowers on the headstone and knelt in the grass. "I did it, Mama," she whispered. "I was brave. I chose freedom. And I found love, real love, the kind you always deserved but never got. I have 2 beautiful children. I have work I love. I have a husband who treats me as an equal and a partner." She touched the carved name on the stone. "I kept my promise, the one I carved in that table, and James remembered it. He has helped me keep it every day since." James knelt beside her, placing his own hand on the headstone. "Thank you for raising such an incredible woman," he said quietly. "Thank you for teaching her to be brave and strong. I promise I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of her." They left the cemetery hand in hand, the past honored but no longer holding power over them. On the way out of Fort Worth, Delilah asked James to stop at the Silver Star Saloon. "I want to see if it is still there," she said. "The table." The saloon looked exactly as she remembered, though perhaps slightly more worn. They went inside, and Delilah walked straight to the back corner. The table was still there, though covered in years of additional carvings and scratches. But her words were still visible, faint but readable. "I promise to never let fear decide my future. I promise to be brave even when bravery feels impossible. I promise to live free or die trying." "Still there," James said, running his fingers over the carved letters. "Just like I am." Still remembering that promise, Delilah leaned against him. "I could not have kept it without you." "Yes, you could have. You were always that brave. I just got lucky enough to be there to witness it." They bought the table from the saloon owner, paying far more than it was worth. They loaded it into their wagon and took it home to the ranch, where it became their kitchen table. Every meal they ate, every conversation they had, happened at that table with those carved words visible to anyone who looked. The children grew up hearing the story of how their parents met, of the carved promise and the journey to San Antonio, and the love that had grown between 2 strangers who took a chance on each other. Robert grew into a serious young man who loved working with horses like his parents. Sarah became a teacher like her grandmother, opening a small school on the ranch property for children of the hands and neighboring families. As years passed, the ranch became one of the most successful in Texas. James and Nathaniel's partnership remained strong, both men respecting and valuing each other's contributions. More importantly, their families became intertwined, their children growing up more like cousins than friends. Delilah never forgot the fear she had felt that day in the saloon, carving words into wood because she needed to see her promise written down, needed to make it real. But that fear became distant, a memory of a different life, a different woman. The woman she became was stronger, braver, more fully herself than she had ever imagined possible. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. Half the county showed up, filling the ranch yard with music and laughter and celebration. Dorothy, now in her 70s but still sharp and energetic, gave a toast that made everyone cry. 25 years ago, my niece showed up at my door with nothing but a canvas bag and a dream of freedom. She had run from violence and fear, traveled hundreds of miles with a stranger who offered help when she needed it most. That stranger became her husband, and together they built something beautiful. They built a partnership based on respect and love. They raised children who know that men and women are equals. They created a business that treats people fairly and honors hard work, and they have shown everyone who knows them what real love looks like. She raised her glass. To James and Delilah. May you have 25 more years of happiness together. Everyone cheered and drank, and James pulled Delilah close, kissing her in front of everyone. She laughed against his lips, thinking about how scandalous such a public display would have been in her youth. How far she had come from that frightened young woman carving promises into tables. That night, after the guests had left and the children had gone to their own homes, James and Delilah sat on their porch watching the stars. It had become their ritual over the years, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "You ever regret it?" James asked. "Running away that night? Trusting a stranger?" "Never, not for a single moment." Delilah laced her fingers through his. "You gave me everything I dreamed of and so much more. You gave me freedom and love and partnership. You gave me children and a home and work I love. You gave me myself. You gave me those things too. Before I met you, I was just drifting, going wherever the wind took me. You gave me a reason to stop drifting, a reason to build something permanent. We built it together." "Yes, we did." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of knowing someone completely. Above them, stars wheeled across the vast Texas sky, the same stars that had watched over them that first night fleeing Fort Worth, the same stars that had witnessed every day since. "I will remember that promise," James said quietly, echoing the words he had spoken 25 years ago. "You always have," Delilah replied. "Every single day you have helped me keep it." And it was true. Every day for 25 years, James had supported her bravery, celebrated her freedom, and loved her with a steadiness that never wavered. He had seen her at her most vulnerable and most strong, and he had loved every version of her. As they grew older, their love only deepened. They weathered storms together, literal and metaphorical. They faced loss when Dorothy passed away peacefully in her sleep, leaving the fair-weather house to Delilah, who turned it over to Sarah to run. They celebrated joy when Robert married a spirited young woman named Catherine, and gave them grandchildren who filled the ranch with laughter and life. On their 40th anniversary, James surprised Delilah by having a craftsman create a replica of that old saloon table, carved with her promise in letters so deep they would never fade. He placed it in their bedroom, a permanent reminder of where they had started. "So you never forget how brave you are," he told her. "So you always remember that you chose freedom, and freedom led you to me." Delilah cried and laughed and kissed him. This man who had seen her carving words into wood and had chosen to remember her promise, had chosen to help her keep it, had chosen to build a life around it. They grew old together, their hair turning silver, their hands becoming wrinkled and spotted. But their love remained as strong as it had been that night in the church during the storm, when they first admitted what they felt. James passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76, on a spring morning with sunlight streaming through the windows and Delilah holding his hand. His last words were, "I love you, I will always love you." Delilah grieved deeply but did not break. She had promised to be brave, and she kept that promise even in loss. She continued to work with the horses, to spend time with her children and grandchildren, to run the ranch that they had built together. And every night, she sat on the porch they had shared for so many years, looking up at the stars and talking to James like he was still beside her. She told him about the grandchildren, about the new foals being born, about the business decisions Robert was making as he took over more of the ranch management. "You would be proud," she told the stars, "of our children, our grandchildren, everything we built. You would be proud that I kept my promise, that I never let fear decide my future, that I lived free, loved freely, and found more happiness than I ever imagined possible." She lived to be 84 years old, sharp and active until the very end. When she passed, it was in her sleep, peacefully, in the bed she had shared with James for over 50 years. Her children found her in the morning with a smile on her face, as if she had seen something beautiful in her dreams. They buried her beside James on the hill, overlooking the ranch, where they could see the horses they had loved and the land they had built together. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, they carved the words she had carved into that table so many years ago. I promise to never let fear decide my future. I promise to be brave even when bravery feels impossible. I promise to live free or die trying. And beneath that, in James's handwriting copied from a letter he had written to her on their first anniversary, I will remember that promise, always. Their love story became legend in their family, passed down through generations. Great-grandchildren grew up hearing about the woman who carved promises into tables and the cowboy who read them and chose to help. They heard about a love built on respect and partnership, about choosing bravery over fear, about how two strangers became soulmates through shared courage and commitment. The ranch continued to thrive, run by their descendants, still operating under the principles James and Delilah had established. Treat people fairly, honor hard work, respect the land and animals, and remember that men and women are equal partners in all things. The replica table with Delilah's carved promise remained in the family, passed down through generations. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is carve your truth into wood and trust that someone will read it and remember. That sometimes the greatest love stories start with a promise made to yourself and a stranger who chooses to help you keep it. And somewhere in the vast expanse of eternity, two souls who had found each other in a Fort Worth saloon and had built a lifetime of love together remained intertwined, their promise kept, their love eternal, their story complete.